It's 11:59 at Gun Owners Radio, and this is the Penn Patriot, music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, and another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind American lines, this is your song.
Would you be open to expanding the national concealed carry to apply to D.C. like it does in other states like Texas?
Yeah. Well, they have it in some states and they feel strongly about it. As you know, I'm in favor of it. People have to protect themselves. I'm a Second Amendment person, very simply. People have to be able to protect themselves. Especially like in Washington, you walk down the street, a guy comes up and slugs you. He's got a pistol in his hand. You can be tough, you can be in great shape, you can be a powerful person, or you can be a guy that weighs 100 pounds with a gun in your hand.
Right.
And I'll bet on the guy with a gun 100% of the time, right? And so you need protection. So I'm a Second Amendment person all the way.
So big news from Glock. They finally released their V version, their Roman numeral 5 version. And there are everybody's talking about it. So there are a lot of places to see very specific breakdowns and that sort of thing. But what we wanted to do is talk about Glock and California. What does it mean for us here in California? Because that was the big question. And frankly, I'm not sure we have all the answers. I think it's raised as many questions as it has answered. But we're going to get into it, talk about it, and figure out exactly what's going on. So, Dakota, did you see the V yet?
I did. Yeah, I watched a couple of videos about it. I think the Glock store, Lenny from the Glock store, has one, and he kind of took it apart and showed some differences. There's another video out there showing the nitty-gritty differences. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what the Glock fanboys think of it.
There you go. And let's take a look at it. This is the Glock V. Here's a picture of the Glock V. And it looks like a Glock. There's not a huge significant difference, but there it is. And it's got a big old fat V right next to the 17.
It's also got a V on the frame itself, so a marking on the lower, which is interesting.
Well, and I think I know why. We'll talk about why. I think it's we'll just say it. They're not compatible. You can't put a non-V slide on a V frame. And I don't think you can't go vice versa either. So I think that's why they're marking it. So anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about exactly what's going on here. So first thing we need to review is the roster. And, I think a lot of people know of the roster, don't really fully understand it, but there's a couple of things that we want to explain about the roster that needs to be explained in order for all of our concerns to make sense. So in order to sell a pistol, any kind of pistol in California through an FFL, so through a gun store, you have to be on the safe handgun roster. Now, individuals can sell guns back and forth, no problem. But in order for a retailer to sell it, it has to be on California's safe, quote unquote, handgun roster. And to get on the safe handgun roster, you have to do a few things. The manufacturer has to submit the pistol to a lab where they fire 600 rounds and they do a drop test. They're looking for malfunctions. After the 600 rounds, they want to see if there are any cracks or anything like that. They want to make sure it doesn't, there's no negligent discharges, et cetera, et cetera. It's really just a product, or I should say a quality assurance type test to make sure that, it's a quality product and it's not, unsafe according to them. By the way, Dakota, a few years ago, I looked into it to see how many have actually failed and been kept out of California. You know what that number is? Zero.
Crazy.
Zero of them.
California making laws that make no sense and don't actually keep people safe. What?
I know. And it doesn't make it better. It just makes it more expensive.
Yeah.
Now, the other way what you have to get on this safe handgun roster above and beyond just going through the lab test is you have to have a loaded chamber indicator that's makes it very clear that the actual there's one in the pipe. There's a bullet in the chamber. There's some kind of indicator on the gun. Some kind of how do you describe it? Like a flag that sticks up?
Yeah, usually I see it as a little flag that pops up out of the top of the slide when there's a round in the chamber. And so at a glance, you can see that yes, there is indeed one in the gun. However, I will argue that this is not a safety feature because it is a mechanism that can break, just like any other mechanism can break. And so if people are using a loaded chamber indicator to determine whether or not their gun is loaded, that is unsafe. You should always be verifying whether your gun is loaded or unloaded by physically, visually looking into the chamber of your gun. So I think that loaded chamber indicators, when broken, are actually more dangerous than just not having a loaded chamber indicator in general.
Yeah.
Because if it breaks and you're like, oh, the indicator's down, so my gun's empty, if somebody's doing that and presses the trigger because they think the gun's empty, like, you're going to have an ND, right? So I don't really think it makes anyone safer to have an indicator.
A massive government requirement that will stop very few. Like, we actually look to see how many accidents happen that way. It's very, very few. All of them could have been stopped with training, with common sense.
That's the problem.
Doesn't really do all that. But
you're trying to save people from themselves, but you can only save people from themselves so much. Like, we need people to understand how to confirm their gun is empty or not
right.
Have this crutch to help them determine that.
Exactly. So you got this loaded chamber indicator. That's one thing you have to have in order to get on the roster, and then you have to have a magazine disconnect mechanism, MDM, and that prevents the firearm from operating when a detachable magazine is not inserted. So it won't actually fire. The mechanism won't work unless the magazine is actually inserted. That's one of the other requirements to get on this roster.
Which also means you can't dry fire your gun without an empty magazine in the gun, know? So it also has unintended negative consequences,
exactly.
like all of these things.
And then the last one is micro stamping. There was a requirement that you have to have, that the firing pin has to actually leave a verifiable mark, a distinguishing mark on the casing before it's ejected from the gun. That is on hold, thanks to lawsuits.
Because it doesn't exist, right? Like, this technology is not in existence. So California was like, here, invent a thing that's never been done and make it happen on every gun from every manufacturer to sell them.
Right. You can buy any car you want in California as long as it flies. That's all. That's the only requirement. As long as it goes the speed of light.
Yes, exactly.
So that's what you have to get on the roster. Now, why is that relevant? Well, let's pull up the pictures. Let's look at the actual Glock V, the insides here. And the pictures are thanks to Lenny from the Glock store. Thank you for providing these. He and I had a conversation a couple days ago, and he went over everything. So if we could pull up one of the internal pictures. There you go. That is, you're looking at the bottom of the slide. And what you're looking at, the top is the V, and the bottom is just a run-of-the-mill, good old-fashioned Glock. It's actually a
Gen 5, I think,
So what's the difference? Well, it's almost nothing. In fact, really, if you look at the Glocks, I thought this was going to be a lot more significantly different than it is, and I'd argue it's not that different. What you can really see is the V on top there. That's the firing pin lug, that square thing that's poking up. So that's actually part of the firing pin. It is slightly smaller, and then the channel in which the firing pin travels, if you notice, has two it's a ramp or depending on which side. The firing pin side, it's a ramp. The plate side, it looks like it actually act as a block of sorts. But it's not significantly different. I mean, this isn't like a huge difference. But that's one of the differences. Let's show the inside of the frame. So this is the upper, and then here's the lower. Now, this is where it got really interesting because of how uninteresting it is. So let's see, the V is on the bottom, and the Gen 5 is on the top, I believe.
I believe so.
They're so similar, I can't even tell the difference. But that cross-shaped metal piece right in the center, that's the cruciform part that they actually mention in AB 1127, which we'll go over here in just a minute. I was fully expecting that thing to be completely redesigned in a whole different shape, which is not completely unheard of. Here, you can see in both pictures, it's not only the same shape, it has the exact same part number.
Yes.
It wasn't changed at all. And the reason they named it is that the Glock switch actually interacted with that, and basically holding that down. An engineer is going to be able to, would go into great detail. It's not necessary to go into great detail, but that piece is what gets held down basically and can potentially turn a semi-automatic Glock into a fully automatic Glock. But that's it. Those are the two guns. Those are the innards. The guts are really no different. It's extremely similar. And I was convinced that because they didn't change that cruciform part, that there was no chance that this thing could possibly be California compliant. Now, why did I think that? And then we'll talk about how Dakota brought up an excellent point and, kind of reshape my thinking on that. So if you look at AB 1127, that was the actual bill that passed into law that they called the Glock ban. And if you look at Section 3, Section 16885, this is how it was added to the penal code. As used in this part, machine gun convertible pistol means any semi-automatic pistol with a cruciform trigger bar that can be readily converted by hand or with common household tools as defined in Section 4082, Title 11 of the Penal Code, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's just talk about that part right there. I was really caught up on the cruciform trigger bar part. I thought as long as that existed, that this couldn't possibly be California legal. Mm-hmm. But Dakota, you pointed out to me earlier this week when we were talking that that's just the first part. What's the other part?
Yeah, the other part is that it can't be readily converted by hand or common household tools into a machine gun by the installation or attachment of a pistol converter as a replacement for the slide's backplate without any additional engineering, machining, or modification of the pistol's trigger mechanism. So I read that to mean that, in the pre-V days, you could take off the backplate, you could put on a Glock switch, and with common household tools, you could modify it. My guess, without knowing completely what the V, what all of those pieces are changing in the V, is that currently as Glock switches exist, they will not fit on the V, and that the slide's backplate will not be easily exchangeable, is my guess. I'm guessing the V has a backplate that's much more difficult to remove than the normal Gen 3s, 5s.
The backplate is definitely different, but the feedback I'm hearing so far is that it really isn't significantly harder to remove.
Interesting.
Which is kind of interesting and confusing, right?
Interesting. Well, I wonder if maybe there's just more machining needed. Maybe the fact that they added that ramp means that you have to machine.
That you can't actually do it with normal household tools.
Yeah, maybe you need a machine. And it specifically, carves out without any additional engineering, machining, or modification of the trigger mechanism. So I'm like, maybe it's requiring machining of the trigger mechanism to make it work now. We don't know. We haven't seen.
We're not positive. We're not positive. And the interesting thing is, so why does all this matter? Well, it matters because in order to get onto the roster, like we said before, it has to have certain requirements. It has to go through this drop test at the lab and fire 600 rounds. It has to have the loaded chamber indicator. It has to have the magazine disconnect, so it can't be fired without a magazine in there. So a Glock V, would it have to go through that process? Because it doesn't have a loaded chamber indicator, and it doesn't have a magazine disconnect. That doesn't exist on a Glock V. So does that totally discount it? Well, part of 1127, AB 1127, is they said basically, look, if you fix this, in fact, I'll read it exactly. If the pistol was listed on the roster described above, where they describe, the roster, et cetera, on January 1st, 2026, the pistol is not subject to requirements of subparagraph D, et cetera, if the pistol was thereafter only modified to change design features which brought the pistol within the definition of machine gun, convertible pistol in section, et cetera, et cetera. So without getting too far into the weeds, basically it was saying, look, if your pistol was already on the roster and it complied or was grandfathered in, and you only changed it so that it was no longer machine gun convertible, and that was done by the end of 2026, then boom, you can be on the roster. A Glock V, I'm not totally convinced fits that criteria. Because if you look, the Gen 3 Glock is what's on the roster. And if you look at a Gen V, they took a Gen 5 and made it into a Gen V. Well, the Gen 5 was never on the roster. And again, it doesn't have the compliance parts that California requires. It did change to make things harder for the Glock switch, I think, without being, without totally understanding all the engineering mechanisms. But it appears to be what they've done. But I'm not so sure that this is what's going to comply with what California spelled out. I'm not so positive that they're essentially a Gen 5 that's converted to a V is now grandfathered in and on the roster, because a Gen 5 is significantly different from a Gen 3, according to California.
Right. Interesting. I think if that's the case, if they did all of this, redesigned their gun, and it's still not compliant,
what the heck?
What happened?
What were you thinking?
Who got fired?
Here's where I know. Well, here's where it gets more interesting. And Glock has done things. They're notoriously, for decades, have been notoriously tight-lipped, and they just kind of do things the way they want to do things. And it's hard to argue with success. They've been very successful. But here's another piece. So what's happening in January in the gun world? What's everybody? SHOT Show, right? And there are now rumors that there is a Gen 6. Not a Gen 6. I think it's just a 6, like a VI coming out. And no one knows the details on that.
Interesting.
But why would they make a V that's, for 2 or 3 months?
Well, if the V is just so that they could be grandfathered into California and they failed that, then that makes no sense. But maybe the V is because, I think we've seen there's lots of other states and cities and places in the country that are suing Glock over Glock switches being, easily convertible and all of that. So maybe they're like, we're going to put out something that's better for our brand anyway, so that we're not the gangbangers' first choice, which could be the V, and then maybe they're going to, kind of go above and beyond with the next thing. I don't know.
That's so bizarre, though. It's such a weird thing to do, to have this thing. Because once a 6 comes out, that V is going to, who cares?
Right.
That V is just going to, no one's going to care about that.
Yeah,
V
I don't
anymore.
get that.
I don't think. Unless this new version is going to be some kind of, purposely California legal version of it.
Well, why would they debut that at SHOT Show? That doesn't feel like a SHOT Show thing. No one cares. Like, SHOT Show's full of people from Texas and, gun-friendly states, right? I don't think that makes much sense. I don't know. It's interesting.
I have no idea what they're thinking. It really doesn't make any sense. The other thing is, there's a lawsuit. We talked to Second Amendment Foundation. There's a lawsuit, it's Second Amendment Foundation and some other, I can't remember all, but it's Second Amendment Foundation and FPC and NRA, I believe, are suing AB 1147. They kind of took the wind out of that sale, So they had this lawsuit that that they didn't even have to fund. The organizations were doing this for them, and then they said, "Well, we're going to just take that product away. We're going to make a V. We're not going to sell the product that you were suing on our behalf. And by the way, it doesn't. Not only can you not sue and help us sell in California, but this won't even comply with what California said they'd do for us." Which is let us back on the roster if all we did was change the the convertible
It
part.
feels like AB 1127, that piece about you can get basically grandfathered back onto the roster, that felt like it was intentionally for Glock.
Right.
And that, to me, felt like Glock and the California DOJ
Yeah.
were working together as a team to make this final form of the penal code something that was beneficial to Glock, right? That's what it felt like to me.
That was my conspiracy theory for sure. Is I was like,
Right.
okay, they had to, because that carve out didn't happen until very late in the process.
Right. Like last minute they changed that. So I'm still
Doesn't make
holding
any
out
sense.
hope. I'm still holding out hope that the V is going to be considered in that carve out and that it'll be back on the roster soon.
I mean, it could be, but
We'll find out together.
why would California? California isn't just Sacramento isn't just sitting there waiting for. Gosh, we can't wait for Glock to comply. We sure are glad that they're gonna. I mean, this was clearly a deeper thing than just the Glock switch thing. But
Well, I will say that, I mean, I think the state makes a decent amount of money on firearm sales, right? So maybe Sacramento was like, yeah, this would be a pretty big hit for our budget if Glocks were actually not around. I mean, the 11% and all the other stuff, like they're making good money. The politicians that be in Sacramento.
Well, here's the other thing is, though, the other part of the conspiracy theory is it came about right around the same time that there was a law enforcement carve out.
Right.
So I'm wondering if they're just like
The police
here,
unions.
Well, here cops, here's your V, here's your version V, and then civilians,
That's an interesting
right.
thought.
So I'm wondering if what I'm saying is the carve out for fixing the switch.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that actually didn't come directly from Glock, but it came
Right.
from law enforcement who were lobbying at the same time.
That's a good
Get their-
thought.
It could be. Sometimes I have good thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the pluses, they altered the Glock to prevent a Glock switch, it looks like.
As they currently exist. I mean, I'm sure it won't take long for somebody to figure out how to do it
Probably.
again, but
And they did it in time to hit the deadline,
yeah.
we think. The minuses is, did they alter it enough? And did they alter it too much at the same time?
Right.
I'm not sure that they altered it enough to really, truly prevent it in the way that California wants. And at the same time, I think they altered it too much so that it doesn't resemble the Glock that's already on the roster.
Right. The Gen 3.
So we're going to have to wait and see. So that's all the information we have. I can't really make a definitive, determination. I don't know if anybody else has enough information right now to make that, to make a determination either. Like I said, we've answered some questions, but it's brought up just as many questions as we have answered. So there you go. There's your Glock V. I don't think you can purchase it in California. In fact, the dealers that I spoke with in California all said that they were going to get theirs at a later date and that they're for Leo only, law enforcement officers only. So I don't know if civilians in California are ever going to get a a version of V model. And we'll have to wait and see what happens at SHOT Show. So there you go. What do you think, Dakota?
Yeah, it's all interesting. This is like the kind of firearms drama I like. I just don't like that it's related to laws in my state. I like when we can, wax poetic about laws in other places, but this one hits close to home. So unfortunately,
I just wish I got to tell you, there's a theme in 2025. The firearms theme is, I wish the manufacturers were better at communication. So there you go. Anyway, here we go. All right, there you go. There's your Glock V update. So if you're a gun owner in California, then you, like me, are extremely upset about the 11% excise tax on firearms and firearms-related purchases. Obviously unconstitutional, but until it is struck down in court, we still need to make our voice heard. So we have a cool way to do that. If you go to sdcgo.org/take action, you'll be able to make your voice heard. You'll be able to write your legislators, write the state of California and say, hey, I disagree with this 11%. So if you look on the page, it will actually have a template for you. I'm writing as your constituent to ask you to repeal the 11% excise tax on firearms, ammunition, and firearm precursor parts that took effect on January 1st, 2024. You can actually go in and edit that yourself. But if you're happy with the template, then you can actually add all your information so that this email comes from you and goes to your legislators here in California, who are the ones that make decisions like this. This 11% excise tax is nothing more than a modern day poll tax. Back in the South, back in the Jim Crow South, they would actually put a tax on voting. So to go to the poll, you had to pay a fee. They did that to keep certain people out of the election. And they said, no way, electing who represents you is of course a right. You can't tax it, especially not in that manner. So that's exactly what they're doing here in California. They're trying to price you out of gun ownership because they don't like gun ownership. What's worse is the money, that 11%, actually goes to a bunch of organizations that do not have your best Second Amendment views as a part of their plan. They're against your ability to keep and bear arms just as much as the state of California. So they're essentially saying, hey, in order for you to exercise your right to keep and bear arms, you have to pay 11% of whatever it costs you to purchase a firearm and ammunition and accessories. And then we're going to take that 11% out of your pocket, and we're going to give it to groups that completely disagree with your right to keep and bear arms so that they can promote their message to other people. It just couldn't get any worse. So please take a minute, go to sdcgo.org/takeaction and make your voice heard today.
So we see in the news, we hear a lot about this concept of ghost guns. And we always kind of laugh when we see that because a lot of times in the comments, people don't have any clue what that is. And they're thinking, oh, these are guns that don't show up in metal detectors, or these are, guns that can't be detected by law enforcement or whatever. That's not what a ghost gun is, right? A ghost gun is a gun that has a portion of the firearm that's supposed to have a serial number that doesn't have a serial number. But that's relatively recent. This has not been a law forever. There were lots and lots of times in our nation's history where folks were, hobbyists building their own guns at home or getting a 80% lower and making it into a full gun over time as they kind of collect the other parts that they want. So this has been a long-standing tradition in our country, and it's not until a few years ago that California really went hard against ghost guns and made a bunch of different laws and basically criminalized behavior that normal, prudent, law-abiding citizens have been doing for decades. What's your
centuries?
Ghost gun? Yeah, centuries, right? So you have some thoughts on ghost guns too, but
yeah, it's just I think that it's what the other side does, what the anti-gun side does really, really well is they pick one thing and they find a pejorative term for it, like ghost guns. Nobody called these ghost guns until the anti-gunners wanted to get rid of them. And then they put all their effort into this one thing, and it's all you hear about until they milk every piece of gun restriction out of it they possibly can. So that's why people start hearing so much about it. It's undeniable that there is an issue with criminals who shouldn't have guns, manufacturing their own guns or stealing guns and taking the serial numbers.
100%.
No question that bad people have guns, but the way they're trying to solve it is they're looking at the wrong person.
Right.
They're keeping guns out of the hands of sane, trained, law-abiding, peaceable people.
So kind of what I was thinking the other day, I saw a headline about a ghost gun situation where a cop found a ghost gun. And I was like, I wonder how many other crimes this person was was committing at that moment when the ghost gun was found.
But was that like the highlight? They were like, oh my gosh, a ghost gun was found.
Yes, exactly.
Look, everybody, look over here.
And the original article that I read didn't even mention any of the other crimes that this person committed. I had to look up their name, find the arrest, find information about the arrest. So I was able to find quite a few examples of this. So this is one California example. This is California Highway Patrol. So they pull over a vehicle for a mechanical violation. So, I don't know, maybe tail light out or something like that, right? And during the stop, the officer observed behavior that raised suspicion of criminal activity. The driver consented to a search of the vehicle, which is interesting, leading to the discovery of a kilogram of cocaine, counterfeit money, $15,000 to $25,000, and a loaded unserialized handgun, commonly known as a ghost gun, in the same backpack. So obviously this person, got arrested, is probably going to serve some time over this. But the original article that I saw didn't even mention the drugs or the counterfeit money. It was just about the fact that this person had a ghost gun, which I found very hilarious. There's another case. This was in Manteca. Also California Highway Patrol. So they respond to the report of a freeway shooting. So this criminal was firing a gun on the freeway. That's not legal. But the purpose of this article...
Ghost gun or not, you're not supposed to be shooting at a...
The purpose of this article is that it was a loaded ghost gun and it had a threaded barrel. And he was booked into jail for illegal possession of an unregistered firearm and assault weapon. It's very heavy on the ghost gun and light on the attempted murder. Thought that was a little bit funny. We've got another one, 20 pounds of meth and a gun, all from a simple stop in Merced. California Highway Patrol stopped a driver for a traffic violation. They appeared nervous when stopped, gave conflicting accounts of their travels, and CHP found 20 pounds of meth and an unregistered Glock handgun. My point with all of this is that we can find case after case after case of criminals doing criminal behaviors that should put them in prison anyway. Making a regular gun, what used to be a regular gun, a ghost gun, and adding more time and more, problems onto that sentence just because it's unserialized, to me, is not fixing this problem at all. The problem is that a felon had a gun and he would go to prison whether it had a serial number on it or not.
Right.
A felon was, had drugs and counterfeit money and a gun. Yeah, that's a problem. A felon shouldn't have a gun, right? So we already have the crime. We already have the thing that could put this person away. Why do we need to add additional crimes onto it? Like, oh no, everything has to have a serial number, when we see time and time again that these people are not getting put in prison for the length of time that they should be. They're getting out very early and they're just going back and committing crimes again. These felons continually get out of prison, get another gun. One of the three that I just read was a guy who's been in prison a few times before. So we see time and time again criminals doing criminal behaviors, but unfortunately the laws and all the changes are making normal law-abiding citizens who had made their own guns in the past criminals. If we had... I actually found a story. I forgot to open it, but there was a story in, I think, North County, San Diego, where just kind of a redneck guy had a gun in his car, didn't know that the law had changed and that it went from being a totally legal gun that he could own to a felony, and got jammed up over it. And he's just like, he's a hunter. Yeah. He's got his hunter safety card. I can't remember if he had a CCW, but he's taking classes and stuff. He's not your run-of-the-mill criminal. He's, a normal redneck dude who likes guns and had made his own gun 15 years ago and still has it. And, unbeknownst to him, was committing a felony by transporting that gun in a vehicle. So
the only law he was breaking was this serial number law.
Exactly.
Which, by the way, if you look at all the examples that you gave of these criminals, the serial number had nothing to do with their case.
Right.
It
Literally
didn't solve
nothing.
the case. It didn't help them get away with anything.
Right.
They were still dealing drugs and, doing all the horrible things they were doing. It's all this is doing is You know, it's interesting. They say that they're trying to keep guns out of the wrong hands, but really they're trying to keep guns out of the wrong hands. In other words, my hands are the wrong hands to keep the gun out of.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yes.
I'm not going to, if I home manufacture a firearm and you call it a ghost gun, you know, it's
I'm not going to all of a sudden be shooting it on the freeway.
right.
Like, that's
Right.
not going to be what the natural progression is
Yeah.
of my life. You know?
And oh, by the way, they're just not solving crime because there was a serial number on the gun. And then to take it a step further, the lawsuit that San Diego County Gun Owners is a part of and FPC is a part of when it comes to home manufacturing firearms is this. Some of the municipalities in California took it a step further. You know, California laid out this plan. Hey, here's how we want you to serialize. If you're home manufacturing a firearm, here's how we want you to serialize and register your firearm. They laid out the steps. Now, I'm not saying I'm supportive of the steps, but at least there were steps.
Right.
The municipalities like the city of San Diego and the county of San Diego said, okay, well, we're going to take the state's steps and we're going to put them in a different order. So it's essentially impossible for you to home manufacture a firearm at all.
Right.
So, and that's not helping. That's not doing anything for anyone. And clearly, I mean, right now, for the last few years, it has been illegal to home manufacture a firearm without a serial number, but it's long been illegal to have a firearm without a serial number or not registered.
Yes.
It didn't stop any of these crimes.
No. Yeah.
Not one.
It's
but it did put this poor guy in North County away.
right. And you have to register your firearm with the Department of Justice, regardless of how it came to be that you own that firearm, whether you built it, whether you bought the pieces, whether you bought it brand new, you bought it from a friend. It has to get registered to you.
Right.
And the folks who, you know, like this.
In California.
In California. And that particular gentleman, his firearm was not registered. You know, the criminals, the firearms were not registered in almost any of the cases that I could find, but all of the articles just focus on the ghost gun part, not the fact that it's an unregistered ghost gun, right? We've got two separate crimes there. So they already would have been going away for a gun-related crime, but now they just have two gun-related crimes, right? Or maybe they already had two and now they have three because they're a felon in possession of a firearm. They're doing whatever they're doing with the gun that was illegal in the first place, and it's unregistered. So this ghost gun thing really is just like adding another charge that means nothing because the court system isn't going to put this person away for any significant amount of time anyway.
It's almost like there's an agenda.
It's almost like
the reporters have an agenda here. Well, that's interesting. That's very interesting.
I kept seeing ghost guns in the headlines and I was like, okay, but what else are we, you know, what other problems do we have in these stories? And turns out a lot of other problems.
Well, maybe seems like every October. Does it seem like every October ghost guns start to, maybe it's a Halloween thing.
Maybe
that's what it is. So.
Maybe. I've seen a lot of articles lately, so.
Awesome.
Remember that we are not lawyers and nothing that we say is to be taken as legal advice. Our sponsor, John Dillon, is a lawyer, and he has been helping to fight those gun violence restraining orders, GVROs, and more. So if you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, give John a call. His website is dillonlawgp.com, and his phone number is 760-642-7150.
Those of you who know me know that I love training. You've heard me talk about different classes I've taken and different opportunities I've had to train with some of the best. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about Massad Ayoob. Those of you who have never had the opportunity to train with Massad, he is a legend in this industry. He was a former police officer. He has a ton of experience with deadly force, and he has a phenomenal instructor program called Deadly Force Instructor. I went all the way to Detroit back in 2022 to take this class from him, and you guys are super lucky. He is going to be coming to San Diego, so you don't have to travel far to get into this class. One of the things that I really appreciated about this class is the opportunity to do a mock trial. We got to actually play different roles in this trial, figure out who gets acquitted or not acquitted, and just deal with all of those repercussions as if they were real. So we had lawyers in class who were, actually debating their client's case. We had different witnesses go on the stand. I got to play the daughter of one of the characters on the stand, so that was a lot of fun. But it was just a great opportunity for us to experience how a good attorney can really make or break somebody's case. And we've seen this time and time again in the deadly force instructor class. Sometimes you have an attorney who gets you off, and sometimes you have an attorney who doesn't. So it's a good opportunity for you to recognize how important the law process is and making sure that you have a good attorney. It's also a great way to make sure that you're teaching your students the best, most well-practiced pieces of the law. So for example, in class, Massad Ayoob will go over a ton of different cases and do some case studies on how these cases turned out so that you can go back to your students with some real life knowledge of how these things played out in court. One of the biggest takeaways for me in this class was the amount of knowledge Massad Ayoob had. And this guy knows so much about so many things. I took probably 8 pages of notes in this class, and I was able to come back to San Diego and I really revamped my entire CCW curriculum based on what I had learned. So not only is it real life data from actual shootings, actual defense situations, but it's also just a wide breadth of knowledge from an instructor who has literally decades of experience in this topic. I really enjoyed the class, and I think you would too. Go ahead and join us in San Diego if you are an instructor wanting to make sure that your students are getting the best information about deadly force and use of force. And if you're a defense attorney and you want to get a little bit of experience in a classroom with a bunch of folks who have the potential to use a firearm for protecting their own life in the future. So it's a great opportunity for you to learn about deadly force, being a better instructor, and being a better attorney.
Turning Point USA and San Diego County gun owners. Just a couple of months ago, that the leader of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, was unfortunately taken from us. And it inspired a lot of our members to ask, hey, what can we do? How can we help? Where can we continue to do the great activism that Turning Point USA was doing? And I got to tell you, I'm very impressed with the organization and how they've continued on and, in fact, grown stronger. But we wanted to help. We wanted to do something to help support what they were doing, because a lot of the folks that we'd met through Turning Point USA were very supportive of San Diego County gun owners and very supportive and interested in the Second Amendment. So here's what we've decided to do. If you go to sdcgo.org/TPUSA, if you are a Turning Point member, we're going to give you a deep, deep, deep discount to our shooting socials. Our shooting socials are a place where people who have never shot a gun before or just aren't that familiar with firearms, you can go and we'll pair you up with someone who is experienced, and they'll teach you how to shoot. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody who goes through Turning Point USA in San Diego, as a part of their experience through Turning Point USA, gets to come and learn how to shoot a firearm, that they get to have some kind of exposure to the Second Amendment, and that they're able to meet an organization that is just as passionate as they are when it comes to activism. So we have these shooting socials at least monthly. If you're a member of Turning Point USA, you can go to sdcgo.org/TPUSA, sign up, and we will help get you into a shooting social where we'll provide the firearm, we'll provide the training, we'll provide the instruction, the ammo, the range, everything that you need to have a first-time shooting experience. You'll get to shoot a pistol. You'll get to work with somebody who's experienced, and again, we'll provide all the protection for the eye and ear protection, an experienced mentor, range, target, everything that you need to have a really, really good time. Normally, these are an affordable $60 ticket. Not a big deal, but for Turning Point USA folks, we're giving you a $50 discount. So it's only going to be $10 to save your spot to come to a shooting social with San Diego County gun owners. So if you're a Turning Point member or you know somebody who is, ask them to go to sdcgo.org, TPUSA, and sign up and come to a shooting social with us. If you're wondering how you can help, if you're not a Turning Point member, then there's a couple of things you can do. Number one, go to our page to sign up to become a mentor for a shooting social so that you can help teach somebody who's never shot before or has very little experience with firearms. You can help them become have a first-time shooting experience by being a mentor for San Diego County gun owners and our shooting socials. Or the other thing you can do is go to our page, sdcgo.org, and donate. Help us be able to afford to put all the Turning Point USA folks in San Diego through this program, because together we will win. Okay, so San Diego has 18 city councils, and I'm going to tell you, that's really where the battle is here in San Diego County, is making sure that those city councils are pro-Second Amendment, because the people who serve in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. from this area come from a city council somewhere, usually. Imperial Beach is this beautiful little beach town all the way down by the border, and they have a brand new city council member, and she's somebody that we've worked with, San Diego County Gun Owners has worked with, and appreciate and respect a whole lot. She's also the president of the Young Republicans here in San Diego. Her name is Mariko Nakawatase. Mariko, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Michael?
Good. Congratulations on being the newest city council member in Imperial Beach.
Yes, thank you so much. It's been an exciting last few weeks. People have asked me if I hate it all yet, but I don't. This is a wonderful dream.
Well, I wanted to kind of tell the story because one of the things I really like talking about when it comes to politics, especially, with what San Diego County Gun Owners and where we focus, is, politics isn't something that happens, for special people, 3,000 miles away in a city somewhere else. You're a very normal person who got involved because you love your city, and boom, worked hard, but not in a way. You didn't work in a way that no one else could mirror or follow. You got interested, you got involved, and then boom, you through a special set of circumstances are now the newest city council member for Imperial Beach, and I really want to tell that story. So why don't we? So why exactly? So it's obviously off. We're not in the middle of a general election, or it was something happened. So let's tell that story. Why was there an opening in the city council for Imperial Beach?
Yes, so earlier this year there was a special election for County Supervisor District 1 here in San Diego County. At the time, Mayor Paloma Gary won that seat, and that we were allowed to have a appointment and a vacancy for the mayor for the city. And my city councilman, Mitch McKay, won that appointment, and now he's the current mayor, which opened up an appointment and a vacancy for District 3 City Council here in Imperial Beach. And although it was the plan to run for office sooner or later, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be this soon, but I knew that I wanted to take the chance and put myself out there and apply for the appointment. And I won.
Which is awesome. So somebody from your city council got elected to higher office, and then that was the mayor, got elected into higher office, and then another city council member from Imperial Beach took the mayor's seat, and so then boom, you're the third domino, and they said, hey, we need to appoint somebody, and you threw your name in the hat, and because you've been involved in your neighborhood, because you are well known to the community, you won the appointment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people liked the concept of what I could bring to the table and what they hoped that I could bring to the table. I really discussed a lot about dedicating the last, 6 years of my life to this. How much I've learned within the county of San Diego and my day job, and kind of bringing that down to the city, and just looking at creative thinking of what we could do.
So what do you bring to the table? What do you think people liked about appointing you as the newest city council member?
I think they liked that I was able to see the resources that were available, whether that may be grant funding or different county resources. My background starts a lot in community outreach and community organizing. And what I've learned, especially with the County of San Diego, is that there's all these wonderful staff and resources that are like, oh, we're trying to do outreach to other communities and whatnot, but we don't really know how. And so that really started a lot in my work with County Supervisor Joel Anderson, and knowing that those people are there and those resources are there and waiting, and there's just someone that's not connecting them. A lot of people liked that concept. I think people enjoyed that I had a positive outlook on Imperial Beach, and I was really looking forward to showcasing the city that really shaped me to grow up to be this kind of individual. I think just with everything, there's so much doom and gloom in the world, and with the sewage crisis, our city really did take a hit, but there's still so much to love about the city. And I really wanted to look at people that wanted to invest in our community and make it great or greater, actually.
See, and I think that's an important thing. Like I know, like when we talk about politics, there's a lot of like hot button issues, that people like headline issues. But the reality is, they want somebody who's going to benefit their community. And I know a lot of people, when they approach, I don't know if this happens to you too, Dakota, but when people talk about politics or talk about, they bring up these huge national issues. And then, when it comes time to run or whatever for office, or, they talk about these huge national issues, or maybe they think because they have a well-formed opinion on some big, huge international or national issue that, hey, they should, be appointed or run for office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that doesn't really instill in me as a voter that they have my city's interests in mind, and that they have that kind of small, you almost have to be a little bit more small-minded in your focus when you're running for something like city council. Having, concerns about state issues or county issues or whatever is great, and you should have concerns, but I want to see my electeds paying attention to issues that impact me. Right. And I know that you've run on kind of a pro-business, pro-tourism, pro getting people what they need help-wise in order to get their businesses off the ground and all of that. And I think those are things that are so much more impactful to your everyday resident in Imperial Beach. So it was nice to see your platform kind of focused on that.
Thank you, Dakota. That's really also something that taught me working in local government politics is obviously government is quite confusing, and a lot of people don't always understand. And it's taken me years, and there's still stuff I don't know, but just how different jurisdictions work and who controls what and who does what. And that's always been a big component in my personal life and professional life, is really, hopefully getting more people civically engaged and spreading that educational awareness, because I think it makes it less frustrating. I, as someone that's works in bureaucracy, but has also had to go up against bureaucracy and try to make things happen, I understand people's frustration. And I look at newly elected officials who think they're going to get everything done, and they have to understand that there's more likely they're going to go up against not only red tape, but other things and other people, of course. And how do you make your ideas and what you want? And it's this concept of working well with people, but also, figuring out where you can get your needs done. With the city, it's really small, so we obviously have less resources. And so how do we think creatively of getting people engaged to keep having these events or new ideas come to fruition and everything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you're not rich, you know what I mean? You didn't spend $1 million to get this done, and I also wouldn't say that you got this because you're connected. I think that you're involved, and when you're involved, it's hard to not be, familiar with people who have influence. But the reality is, you put your personal resume up, and they said, yeah, this is the kind of person that we want in Imperial Beach. And the kind of person they want in Imperial Beach is someone that is involved, someone that doesn't just simply have, these concepts or opinions, but someone that's actually rolled up her sleeves and got to work and is making the community a better place. And I think that that's an important message. I think that it's a misunderstanding. I run into this all the time when people talk about politics or talk about the Second Amendment or whatever. They think that it's so much higher level than it really is, and really what it boils down to is, hey, who's rolling up their sleeves and who's actually getting something done. So I think that that's an important story. Now, that being said, the reason San Diego County gun owners likes you is because you're very pro Second Amendment. So you've helped organize with the Young Republicans. You've helped organize Second Amendment events to get them educated on Second Amendment issues and that sort of thing. You and I have certainly, you've been very helpful with information on other people that are running and that sort of thing. And I'm very appreciative of that. So thank you so much for, supporting our issue and supporting our organization and making sure that we had, a seat at the table, a voice in everything that you're doing.
And I would have to echo the same things to you, Michael, and your staff and your wonderful group of mentors, because I think I told you I had never really interacted with guns before 2022, besides maybe like a few, shooting ranges, casual shooting ranges, maybe a little bit when I was doing some military programs and training when I was younger. But obviously my concept of really with guns was really what I saw on the big screen and on TV. And it was really our first, the first time I shot with you guys that I not only felt confident, but really comfortable and safe with guns. And it's kind of interesting because I think when a lot of these like coalition issues, parental rights, Second Amendments, you don't really see how, I don't want to say like how serious they are or how important they are to people until you kind of have more of a personal connection or interaction with them. And so I was really thankful for that kind of interaction, because even though a lot of the shooters that come to our events with you guys and stuff are usually pretty people that already have shoot before, I really like seeing the first time shooters. And even some younger colleagues that I've worked with recently have gotten more involved, shooting comfortably at gun ranges and whatnot. And it's kind of nice to see that, again, that change in tone and seeing the difference and the importance of it all. And so I just really want to thank you guys for kind of always being supportive in that, but creating those opportunities and environments for us, because that was a huge thing about me running for president, was creating those opportunities for my members to not only interact with each other, but with politics, local issues, and everything like that.
Well, I appreciate it very, very much. So what's the next step? Do you have to run or for office in November, or what's the next step?
Yes, so I do plan on running for city council for the election in November 2026, and whatnot. I'll still be president of the San Diego Republicans until 2027. So I'd love to find the next great leader for this organization, because a great leader is someone that can step away from an organization and still run successful. I had a great president before me, Cynthia Cowie, who's been on with you guys. She laid a great foundation for us to be successful. And so I'm hopefully to find my successor in that.
Well, what do the YRs do? What do the Young Republicans do? Give a quick pitch for Young Republicans.
Yeah, so currently the San Diego Young Republicans, we meet monthly, not to have meetings, but hopefully to have events, everything from fun ones to like karaoke. We've done community service events. We have a little bit of everything for everyone. If you're politically focused or if you just want to find like-minded individuals to meet with, I think we're the community group for you. We really focus on our programming and making our membership enjoyable. So you're not just spending more dollars towards something that you're not really getting something out of. We want to hear what you guys want to do.
Awesome. Now, for those who want to help with your campaign or want to learn more about you, do you have a campaign website up yet or not quite yet?
I currently don't have a campaign website, because just like any start of a good campaign, you need to have good financials and a foundation order. I've tried to really up my social media a little bit more and whatnot. And so I'm really looking to do content, because social media isn't that huge in our city, on our city council. So I'm hoping to kind of showcase a little bit more like that. But I will be asking for everyone's support and meeting new people. I had a great meeting last night with the Coronado Republicans Club. They had over 100 people at this meeting, and it was amazing. And kudos to them for grassroots organizing on the island.
Awesome. Well, congratulations again. I wanted everybody to know who you were, and I wanted everybody to hear the story, and I appreciate what you've done. So thank you, Mariko. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
You bet. So, have you been, Dakota? When's the last time you were in Imperial Beach? Have you been down to Imperial Beach in a while?
It's been a while, honestly. I was trying to think when she was talking because I know I went to Imperial Beach when I was a freshman at San Diego State University, and I was trying to think, have I been down there since then? I've been to like Chula Vista a couple of times. We've got friends who live down there,
Yeah.
but I don't know if we've actually crossed into that like IB part of the southern, border area. Um, there is a good, and I think it's in Chula Vista. There's a good estuary down there, but I don't think it touches IB. So yeah, it's probably been like
It's
10 years.
It's a cool little town. They've really made a lot of cool improvements, like restaurants and the beachfront and
Oh,
everything,
nice.
and the
Okay.
pier. The only thing is that like 9 times out of 10, you can't get in the water
Right,
because
that's
of
what
all the
I've heard.
sewage coming up from
Yeah,
Mexico or whatever. And
I know.
I hope they can help solve that problem.
Yeah.
But she's like it as far as Second Amendment and elected officials south of San Diego. There's not one single pro Second Amendment city
Wow.
council member on San Diego City Council. Nobody in Chula Vista. Coronado, there's one or two I can't quite remember, but Imperial Beach, that's pretty much she's it, man.
Wow.
She's our southern flank there, so that's
I love seeing younger, not just because I'm a younger woman, but I love seeing some younger folks getting involved in politics and being successful.
Yeah.
Because I often feel like a lot of the politician views that I'm seeing are not reflective of people who are like my age,
Yeah.
And so it's nice to see some younger blood in there.
There you go. So you're going to hear more about her. She's not endorsed by San Diego County gun owners yet, but I have a feeling that she's going to easily make her way onto that voter guide. But we still got to vet her and question her and vote on it and do all the things. But she's I can't imagine a better option coming along in Imperial Beach. So thank you, Mariko, for everything you've done, all your leadership with the YRs, and taking the time to sit down with us. So there you go. This is brought to you by Cargo, cases and rugged gear outfitters in El Cajon. Go to cargostores.com, buy something today, or visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. There are two enemies of your firearms, rust and the government. The good news is Cargo has your back on both fronts. As a proud sponsor, they're helping us fight to get more pro-Second Amendment officials into office, and their rugged cases help you keep your firearms secure and protected. Built like a tank, Cargo cases are stackable, weatherproof, and ready for anything. Whether you're hitting the range or going off the grid, you need a Cargo case. Whether for your gun or other equipment, you need a Cargo case. And here's something that's just for our listeners. If you buy a Cargo case in the store at Cargo Rugged Gear Outfitters in El Cajon, just mention Gun Owners Radio, and you're going to get a free desiccant pack. And that's going to help keep your gear bone dry, battle ready, and rust free. Visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. Great products, great prices, and uncommonly good service. Cases and Rugged Gear Outfitters. Cargo. Check them out. So if you're anywhere near the gun world and you aren't living under a rock, you will know that the NRA has had a bumpy few years. But you should also know that they've made huge strides in turning the ship around and doing good things. And I'm actually very happy and excited about their future. But they're still transitioning. They're still making sure to get the right people in the right places. And there is an election coming up. They're electing board members. And so we've asked Rob Beckman from Ohio to come on and talk about why he's running for NRA board. How you doing, Rob?
I'm doing good, Mike. Appreciate you having me on your radio show.
You bet. So let's talk about, so you're running for NRA board of directors, right?
Correct.
Okay. So let's talk about your background first. What do you do? What's your experience with guns? That sort of thing.
Well, professionally, I'm a IT project manager for a global manufacturer, and I run projects all over the world. And part of that has given me a lot of visibility into how large companies run, how their boards operate, and different things along those lines. So professionally, I'm not necessarily in the gun industry, but as a hobbyist, I've been in the gun industry now for close to 30 years. Originally starting off with just deer hunting in the Midwest. Many people do that. And then as concealed carry started coming about in the early 2000s, I was one of the initial wave of people in Ohio got our concealed carry licenses, and looking and seeing what was being taught, I went along and said, well, this would be something I could teach too. I was already teaching hunter education, so it just kind of naturally came, and I became a NRA pistol instructor, which allowed me to go along and teach the Ohio concealed carry course. After doing that for a couple of years, I went along and was eligible to become an NRA training counselor, so I became a training counselor. For the audiences, the difference between just being an NRA instructor and NRA training counselor is, as a NRA training counselor, I'm able to go along and train new instructors for it, who can then go along and train new students for it. And not only did I become an NRA training counselor, but I also finished up my certification with the NRA with all their civilian courses. So rifle, pistol, shotgun, muzzleloader, personal protection, refuse to be a victim, all these different courses. I'm one of the few training counselors that have 100% of the NRA training courses that I'm certified in order to teach. That also kind of led me into my other kind of hobby, and that is being the host of the Firearm Trainer podcast. Because as a training counselor, you get a lot of questions from new instructors. We're going to teach at how do I go along and deal with these kind of issues? How do I just market my class? How do I go along and get those new students? And how do they improve themselves? Simple questions like that. And NRA, USC say everybody who does certification courses focuses on their certification of their course for it. They don't necessarily have a business course or telling you how to work with social media. Anybody in the firearm industry knows how difficult social media can be at times. And that's where I kind of saw the opportunity there to go along and create a podcast, focus at instructors on different topics for it, about, what is some additional training that people could go along and take, something along the lines, from a first aid course to teach the instructor how to teach their students, or going along and advanced pistol craft or rifle shooting. Where would they go along and find additional information about reaching out to various demographics that are being victimized by criminals, and helping those demographics out? And all those kind of questions we've brought up on the podcast. And the one that I'm kind of very passionate about is when it comes to mental health. I know that's been one of those hot button issues. Nationally, everybody talks about mental health. But the one thing where I go along and kind of, really bring it back to home for my listeners is to go along and have people realize that firearm owners are, I think, close to 80% successful on committing suicide. And the thing is, those people aren't necessarily the ones that are, committed to mental hospitals, or at some point there's somebody who is having an issue during their life, having, relationship problems, financial problems, health problems, all these different things. And the one thing that they forget about is that without them being around, their family, their friends, their siblings, their parents, whoever they leave behind, are going to be left with that question: why'd they do it? And that's where I go along as an instructor, as a training counselor. I make sure people realize that we do a lot of crazy things, stupid things. Sometimes we get ourselves into trouble. But when you're talking about family and friends, they're the most forgiving people. Your kids don't care about, that you had your house foreclosed on. They just want the parent around. Your parents don't care if you broke up with your umpteenth spouse. They want their child around still. Those types of things, to where, okay, it's not a great situation, but realize there are resources for it. And then along those same lines, make sure gun owners know that if they're having issues, sometimes, as much as we want to go along clean to our guns, we know it's better maybe to give them to a friend. have them outside the house so that when we get into a heated argument with our spouse, it doesn't become a temptation for us or them. And just being responsible from that standpoint, support Second Amendment 110%, but also go along and talk about, being responsible ownership of making sure your gun isn't used inappropriately by either you or somebody else. So that's kind of a little bit about who Rob Beckman is and kind of what brought us here. And then
I love that.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks for sharing that. I've taken a ton of classes. I've worked with a lot of different instructors, and I think some instructors do feel kind of nervous to bring up the concept of mental health or to talk about suicide. And so I love that that's something that you are passionate about and that you make sure you teach in your classes. But I just want to kind of ask you a little bit about, how does all of this background, your instructor experience, your business experience, how does that translate to what you're trying to do with the NRA and joining the board?
Well, I'm passionate about the Second Amendment, as I said. And about 5 years ago, when the NRA started having problems, people were getting upset about what the current leadership was doing, or in some cases wasn't doing. I was working with people similar to myself that went along and said, I'm gonna run for the board. I need somebody to collect signatures for me. And I was going along and being one of those people that helped collect signatures for them to get them on the ballot. And then once they got on the ballot, working to educate people to say, hey, vote for these people. They are committed to reforming. And last year, out of the 26 board positions that were up for elections, the NRA 2.0 reformers were able to go along and capture, I believe, 19 or 20 of those. Wow. So when you go along and, we're slowly turning the tide. The ship is turning because Doug Hamlin, the current executive vice president, he's one of the reformers. He wants to see things reformed, and he's been making a lot of progress. Bill Bockenberg, the current president, he's also a reformer. So 2 years ago, the president and executive vice president were not reformers. They were going along saying there was nothing wrong.
Right.
And that's where we've got new ones in. And you can, if anybody's been watching what's been happening with NRA over the last 6 months, with the new president, with the new executive vice president, they are doing things to provide value to the members. At the same time, they're going along and really looking at what they're spending money on and what makes sense. One of the most recent announcements that they've made is that they're merging their media, marketing, and institutional advancement into one department. So instead of 3 people working in 3 different directions, they're going to take the same people that need to go out there and touch the members to ask them about joining or new members, and they're going to do it in a more concerted way. Any large enterprise looks at those kind of opportunities and merges departments. They go along and say this doesn't make sense in today's environment. Earlier this summer, I know I talked to a lot of people when I was collecting signatures. They were getting inundated with mail. As most NRA members know, you get mail, and then the next day you get more mail from the NRA. Buy this, donate this, special, and just like, why don't they just save the money and not send me all that? Well, they've actually started going along and doing some business intelligence where they go along and look and see what's working, what's not working. They've got a new marketing company that they're working with. One that specializes in nonprofits that supportive of the NRA mission. Those are some of the things to where they're small, but will actually pay big dividends, because as a member, I don't mind donating money to the NRA. I don't want to see my money wasted on things that do not promote the mission of the NRA.
100%. So how does your business experience and, your career, what would you bring to the board as far as helping in those areas?
Well, for one, most everything runs around IT these days for it. I mean, whether it's social media and you're got to get things out there, you've got to schedule things. I've got a successful podcast, so I've got social media. Also, from a corporate world, I've worked in corporate governance. I've implemented projects, worked with the legal departments in my current company. I've worked with external lawyers, the CFOs, financial people, so I understand accounting systems for it. Probably the one area that I haven't dealt with is probably more on the political activism side of things. But I think the NRA's got that pretty well covered currently. They've got to have a better operations overall, and that's where I've got the global enterprise, large enterprise, to how to deal with large problems and implement things successfully. But also too, I bring my training experience. I've been training now for over 17 years.
Wow.
And with that, I can go along and help on the education training, because the NRA education training has been the gold standard for a long time when it comes to those beginner shooters. And that I want to see continue. But I think we can all probably agree that the market has changed quite a bit in the last probably 10, 15 years. We've got constitutional carry in 29 out of 50 states for it. We've got concealed carry in all 50 states. We've got a lot of different needs to go beyond just a basic bullseye shooting program, and more into, okay, how do you go along, move and shoot? How do you go along and de-escalate? How do you go along and use pepper spray or tasers? These different types of products that are there. And as I said, the NRA is the gold standard, but they also need to look at and say, okay, what does the market need? Do we need to have a constitutional carry course, so people realize that it's your right in those states to carry, but it's also your responsibility. The laws are.
Yeah, 100%. There's been so many changes, even just in the last 10 years. And I think one of the complaints that we hear the most from, NRA instructors, and I'm an NRA instructor as well, is some of the curriculum's a little bit outdated. And so it's nice to see that there's so much, time and effort being spent on fixing up that education, making it a little bit more current. There's some kind of old fashioned stuff still being taught in some of the curriculums. And so it's good to see some of that getting revamped.
Myself and probably several dozen instructors that I know would be more than happy to go along, literally volunteer our time, to build a defensive shotgun course, to update the pistol course, to go along and have a modern sporting rifle course, different things along those lines that the current course offering the NRA has is lacking. And that's where, they've got dedicated staff there, but they've got a total of 6 staff members. They can only do so much. They can't be generating courses, and they need the budget and the time to be able to do that.
Definitely. What are your thoughts on instructor credentials for board members? It sounds like education's like a big part of where you're coming to this from. What do you kind of think about instructor credentials? Is that something that you want a requirement for board members, or are you okay with a mix?
Well, here's my thought when it comes to board members. If you're going to be a board member, you should be a minimum of a life member for it. I mean, just boom, you should have that commitment to being a life member. And then as you start looking at being on different committees, if you're going to be in education training, you should be an instructor, probably even a training counselor, because a training counselor, you're going to have 50 plus students underneath your belt. So you'll have a little bit more experience about, okay, well, what's it like to teach somebody who's 20 years old versus somebody who's 80 years old? What's it like to teach women compared to a man? What's it like to teach military versus law enforcement? All these different demographics that you want to be able to bring to the table. But here's one thing too, that I don't have a clear answer on this yet. The NRA has a 76 member board currently. Every year, you get elected to a 3-year term. Every year, 25 people are elected onto the board or re-elected, whichever way, and then there's the 76 that is voted for at the convention. Well, a lot of people that I've talked to over the last couple of years have said they need such a big board so that they can go along and have all these committees filled. Well, coming from corporate America, I see smaller boards of no more than a dozen or 2 people that focus to drive results on that, and then they bring in the experts that they need in those specific areas. So instead of going along and having, say, 8 training counselors on the education training committee, you could have 2 or 3 and then bring in industry experts that know about adult learning, that know about non-lethal, type of self-defense, or know that, okay, here's what the marketing says that we need to come up with, and drive it to having courses that are more along those lines, versus trying to go along and having 10 board members in there. You got too many cooks in the kitchen. You've got all different kinds of ideas for it. I mean, being a board member, you should be driving results for it. And that's where, I go along. I'm not going to say it needs to be shrunk, but if it shrinks and I lose my position because of it in 3 years, I wouldn't go along and see that as a bad thing. I'd see that as a good thing, because I'm still going to be an NRA member, and I still want to see my money put to good use. I don't want to go along and be sitting there in 30 years and say, I remember back in 2026 when I got elected. That is not going to be me. I'll guarantee that.
So your concept is that the committee members wouldn't have to be on the board, right? So they would just be kind of brought in as needed on that particular committee, and then the board itself would be much smaller.
Yeah. I mean, currently the board pulls in some non-board, or committees pull in some non-board members, but the vast majority of the membership on the board or the committees are board members, staff, and maybe a couple consultants that they bring in. I'd like to see it be a couple board members, the staff who's got to implement it, and then bring consultants in that you can take and drive results, whether that is education training, whether that is tax and finance, because, when you look at all those types of things, you need experts that know what the tax law is. You need to know what audit and finance is. You can't have a bunch of people saying, well, that's what I thought it was, when the IRS comes knocking on your door. Same thing when it comes to education and training. Get the experts that really know it, work at it, and then drive the results from there.
I think that's great. You sound really passionate about everything that you're talking about, and hopefully we'll see some change here in the NRA in the next couple of years. I know it's something we've all been hoping for a while. You mentioned a term a couple of times. You said the term reformer. Just really quickly kind of give our listeners an idea of what's the difference between a reformer and kind of the older guard.
Well, the older guard is pretty much everybody who was there prior to 2020. They were the old guard. They supported the old executives that were there. Quite frankly, rubber stamped a lot of their ideas for it. That got the NRA into a lot of trouble for it. They got in trouble for the carry guard back in 2016, 2017. That cost a lot of money. It also got us in trouble with Letitia James up in New York, because when she came after us trying to disband the NRA, she found out she couldn't do that, but she also uncovered that some of those executives were not doing their jobs properly. They were expensing things they shouldn't be expensing. And I bring those points up simply because, as a board member, you have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the nonprofit money is being used properly, and going along and paying for things that are not appropriate is not proper fiduciary responsibilities for it. And we've got new people on the audit committee, new people on the finance committee. They're looking to address those issues. And as a reformer, the people I've helped put there, they've helped initiate and I'm going to be following in their footsteps to go along and make additional reforms in the education training area, as well as the kind of the third area that I like to focus on or talk about is in the demographics NRA is appealing to. And I bring that up from the standpoint of, I went out and I collected over 500 signatures in order to get on the ballot, as well as I was nominated by the board. So I'm very proud of having both those nominations. But talking to thousands of people, and I literally did, you find out that there's a lot of gun owners that don't see a need for the NRA. And they don't see a need for the NRA because of what's been going on over the last 5, 10, maybe 15 years, depending on how old they are. And that's where people need to realize that the good stuff the NRA does. The NRA also has gotten into some social issues, which have turned off different demographics because they think the NRA is, quite frankly, a bunch of old white guys, versus they should be looking at it. NRA is a pro 2A organization. We don't care what color your hair is, your skin, or anything else like that. As long as you're supportive of the 2A, you should feel welcomed in the NRA for it. And that's one of those pieces, because I'll give you a quick example. I went to a gun show in Ohio, a gun show for gun collectors. I'll even more specific for it. And 90% of the people there weren't NRA members. Ohio's pretty gun friendly, and 90% of the people there were not members. And it shocked me because I could see it maybe, if it's Illinois or someplace that is anti-gun, really hard, and not many people have guns. But in Ohio, we've got a lot of people with guns, a lot of really neat guns. And when people don't see a need to support the NRA who's out there fighting for it, you realize there's an image problem. Mm-hmm. And the old guard didn't really see a problem with their image. The new guard were realizing that, hey, we need to get out there after those 8 million new gun owners during the pandemic and say, hey, we're here supporting your right to go along and own firearms. It's not just one gun a month. It's not just a 10-round magazine, but your right to go along and own a firearm legally for it. Well, and that's.
I got to tell you, what you're talking about. I'd given up on the NRA. I defended them and then just walked away and said, all right, I think that's it. And a lot of people stepped up, a lot of organizations stepped up and filled the vacuum. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I think the NRA is just done. Like
maybe a little diversity is good, right? Like more organizations, maybe that's beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. And I kind of, be honest with you, just didn't care what happened with the NRA. The NRA has won me back person by person. People like board members, Amanda and Doug Hamlin, mm-hmm. like actual personal conversations. And not everybody gets to do that. So I'm really happy that I was able to connect with these people and that they personally convinced me that this was a good thing that they were doing. And I'm hearing a lot of the same things. In fact, everything you've said, I think is right on point, particularly when you were saying, hey, we need to work on the infrastructure. We need to work on the things, the non-political things, because you're right. NRA's got, politics and political opinions and political employees and connections out the yin-yang. But what needs to happen, and I don't think that it's obvious to everybody, what needs to happen with any organization for them to be effective is, the people in the back office have to be doing have to have the ability to do their jobs and have to have the support to do their jobs. Has to be modern and efficient. Otherwise, all the other stuff that the stuff that people are donating for the NRA to do, it doesn't happen, or at least doesn't happen effectively. So I really truly appreciate it. I think you're one of the people that are. I'm going to add you to the list of people that are winning me over. That the NRA is important, but this whole long diatribe here that I'm given, why is it important? Why was it important to you? Why didn't you just walk away from the NRA and say, hey, you know what, I'm done. Like all this ridiculousness that's happening, I'm just going to support this group or that group or the other group. Why is it important for you personally? Why did you say, hey, you know what, the NRA has to exist and I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and help them?
Well, early 2000s, when we started having concealed carry in Ohio, I became an NRA life member. And because of that, I could walk away, but I was still a member because I'm a life member. I wasn't going to go along, write them and turn in my life membership card for it. And being a instructor, you see that there are benefits to it. The piece about it is, and we talked to a lot of staffers over the years about updating education training, and every time we get that bunch of email or bunch of mail in the mailbox, you shake your head and it's like, there's got to be a better way of doing it. And every time I said that, and every time I went to an annual meeting, I'd end up talking to somebody. I'd end up, talking a little bit more about, okay, what can we do here? And that's when you run into people, like Amanda. You run into people like Rick Ector. You run into people like Todd Ellis. And you start, they're saying, yeah, we understand, we know. And then they go along there, but if you can help me, this is what you can do. And I'm not one of those people normally to take a back seat. And if I can help, steer the ship in the right direction, get the right people in the captain's seat doing those types of things, I'm going to step up and do what I can, because I don't like, some of the political environment we're in currently, to where the for any problem that comes up, we point to the other guy. It's not my fault. It's his fault. It's like, well, if somebody would have done something, we wouldn't be in this situation, would we? But we're always willing to pass the buck to somebody else. And I'm the opposite, to where it's like, okay, if I can do it, I'll do it. Just, point me in the right direction. That's where helping people get on the board for the last 5 years is, I'm very happy with that. They've asked me this year to, jump on the ballot and help out along those lines, and gives me additional visibility into it. Being at the NRA annual meeting, and have Doug Hamlin walking around by himself and listening to NRA members tell them how bad they screwed up. I mean, that's pretty ballsy. I mean, when you really think about it. And Doug Hamlin was not sugarcoating, and he's like, "You're right. I'm not gonna make excuses for it." And that's what we've got to go along and do. We need you to stay with us so that we can continue to go along and do the good work, because we got the NRA Foundation, we've got the women's programs, we've got the Eddie the Eagle program, all these different pieces that are doing really good, that are overshadowed too much by the stuff that was done by the old guard. And that's where we're really trying to go and make that break, to make sure that people see value. Here's a simple one that the current board is working on that I can't wait to see, but they're actually putting together a smartphone app. So as an NRA member, you can download the app and you can actually find out what's going on. Now, here's one of those things that blows my mind. I'm vice president for Ohio Rifle and Pistol Association. Most people, when they talk to me, it's like, yeah, I wouldn't mind go shooting, pistol, rifle, shotgun. But they have no idea what competitions are going on, because the NRA only prints those in their magazines that come out. You've got to have it in 45 days ahead of time for it prints. So it's between 2 and 3 months old by the time it gets printed. At the same time, I'm doing classes right down the street from these people, and they don't know where to find the NRA classes that are around, or an NRA club. Having a NRA app, I think, would be a great benefit, because then when people go along and say, well, what's the NRA doing for me? Well, there are Friends of NRA events. There are grants that you can apply for your high school shooting team. There are these women events that are there. There are these pistol competitions and rifle events that you can go to, and people go along, wow, I get all that for $35 a year. And it's like, yep. And those are some of the things that people just don't realize, and have been overshadowed for way too long for it, because the NRA does quite a bit. We need Second Amendment Foundation. We need Firearm Policy Coalition. We need Gun Owners of America, because one of the things that I go along, and a lot of these groups have flourished as the NRA has struggled, but I don't see them as competition, because we're all doing our little piece for the Second Amendment, whether it's the Second Amendment Foundation leading a lot of litigation that's going straight up to the Supreme Court to get litigated and coming up with some great, or you got Gun Owners of America really pushing at the state level to go along and have laws changed. We've all got our own little focus. I'm a member of all those organizations, but at the same time, I'm a member not because I don't believe in the NRA. I'm a member because I believe in their mission, just like the NRA, and realize the NRA has a lot of programs for it. They need to do a better job of advertising for it, but we also need to have somebody, like Adam Kraut and the Second Amendment Foundation, really pushing litigation. And we need somebody like Eric Pratt over there at Gun Owners of America going along and saying, no, Ohio or Illinois or whatever the state is, you can't do that. And if you do that, we're gonna go along and raise an army up against you, because we're gonna have your constituents up in arms, as well as litigation from the Second Amendment Foundation. Oh, by the way, and then we're gonna go along shoulder to shoulder with the NRA, and they're like, yeah, we don't want to go. That's gonna be 3-on-1, and that's where we make headway. We made headway with the NFA this year. The tax is down to 0, but hopefully in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe we can get the NFA abolished altogether. We'll just see how well.
Completely.
But they're all playing nicely together, which is a new thing in the Second Amendment space, that everybody's playing together.
Well, it's nice to see, right? It's been a long time since we've seen kind of this copacetic relationship between the organizations, and I think honestly, it's a great outlook to have. I'm looking forward to the next few years in the Second Amendment space, and thanks so much for coming on and talking to us. We really appreciated this time with you. So.
I appreciate it. One last thing for the listeners that are out there. The ballots will be out in the February edition of the NRA magazine for it. The people will be getting the third week of January. And if they want to find some information about me and the other reform candidates, you can go out to electanewNRA.com. And you've got our bios as, for all 21 of the reform candidates. There's 21 out of 38 that you'll find on that website that I would highly encourage everybody to look at closely, and then support the reform efforts so we can continue pushing the NRA in the right direction so it supports its members and also the Second Amendment.
Great. We'll put the link to the reform website up under this clip. So thanks, Rob. Appreciate everything you do, man.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a good one.
So it wasn't too long ago that it was basically impossible to get a CCW in most parts of California. And now not only can you get a CCW all over California, but if you're not a resident of California, you can get a California CCW. California doesn't recognize any other CCWs. They have no reciprocity with any other state. In order for you to carry concealed in California, you have to have a CCW. So FPC came up with a lawsuit, the Hoffman versus Bonta lawsuit, and they said, hey, if you're requiring that they have a CCW and you're not allowing out-of-state people to get a CCW, then you're infringing on their right to bear arms. Well, they won the lawsuit. The Hoffman versus Bonta lawsuit challenged California's prohibition on out-of-state residents receiving carry licenses. The Hoffman order issued by the United States District Court for the Southern District of California allows non-residents to apply for CCW licenses in California. This ruling is significant and it ensures that individuals maintain their Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms when they cross California's border. That's from the FPC website where they talk about their lawsuit. The case is part of FPC's strategic litigation program aimed at eliminating unconstitutional laws and creating a world of maximal liberty, which is awesome. So they filed this lawsuit, the Hoffman lawsuit, and that was their complaint. And it was successful. And the court said, hey, you got to start issuing these permits to people from out of state. So we've been getting inquiries, here and there. It definitely benefits California in the long run to have more CCWs issued. And I think it's going to benefit Californians to have more non-Californians apply for CCWs because they have to make a process that out-of-state people can follow. And if they do that, it's just going to make our process even easier to follow. So, and we're already seeing that. We're already seeing that happen to an extent, and I'm already looking into my crystal ball, and I think it's going to be even better, a year, 2 years, 3 years from now for Californians because all these out-of-state folks have started to get their CCW issued, but mainly because Hoffman versus Bonta was a success. So I'm very happy about that. Now, our friends, so how do you do it? That's the big question. How do you do it? What do you got to do? What's the process, And we've been so busy making sure that people in California can get their permit that I haven't spent a lot of time figuring out exactly what the process is laid out. And the courts were very thorough. They didn't just, stop and say, all right, great, you got to start issuing, let us know how it goes. They made sure that the state of California had a process in place and that these things were actually happening. So our friend at Active Self-Protection, ASP, John Correa, actually went through the process. Rather than recreate the wheel, I want you to go check out. We're going to have a link to his video below, but he does not live in California. He lives in Arizona, and he wanted a California license for when he visited California. And so let's just show a little bit of his video.
So yeah, I am originally from the great state of California, but I don't live there anymore. Those of you who know, if you've been around Aspa a while, you know I live in Phoenix, Arizona. But we have family in California. My sister lives there. My dad lives there. My wife has family there. And I'm in California not irregularly. And of course, they do not recognize any out-of-state permits. And they weren't providing out-of-state non-resident permits at all. Well, then there was a court case that, again, I've put links in the description on stuff that the Ninth Circuit said, no, you need to do that. That's an important thing that you have to do. And so, in particular, I started then looking around and going, which county should I apply in? Well, because they're issued by the county sheriff, or they can be issued by chiefs of police of cities as well. And once you have one in one county, it's good for the entire state.
So he goes on to say that he went to the county of Fresno and is going through the process. I want you to check out his video. We're going to have a link to his video. Check this out. If you're from out of state, or you know anybody from out of state and they're interested in getting their California CCW, watch this video. But if you're not familiar with ASP and John Correa, I want you to subscribe to his channel as well. They provide great information on defensive gun use. He's a great instructor. He's a very interesting guy. He deserves your subscription, especially for going and taking the time to apply from out of state and then putting it up on his website. So check out his video. It's more than one part. This is what we just showed you was a short snippet of the first part of his process. Follow the process. You want to make sure that you apply. I think you should probably go through Fresno, like he said, if you have some kind of reason for being in Fresno. But if you have a choice between counties, you want to make sure that you don't go to some county that has some crazy rules like no red dots and other stuff that's just going to have to get litigated or voted out. You want to make sure that you're going to a county that'll respond to you. You know, LA County is taking forever right now if they're issuing at all. And you want to make sure that when you take the class, you use that county's particular vendor list when it comes to how to get your CCW. So in other words, at some point they're going to say, great, you need to take a 16-hour class. So you have to go through the vendor list from that county. Make sure you do that. All that's going to be explained in John Correa's videos. Go to his link. Again, like ASP, start watching his videos. He does a great job. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask us. We'll do our best. We wanted to make sure that you had the resources you need to be successful. So there you go. If you're from out of state, that's how you apply for your CCW in California.
Well, guys, I've been very busy messing up an AR-15 from Bravo Company Manufacturing, but we want to talk about cleaning this weapon up so we can continue shooting it. And to that end, Dwight, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah. Seal One products are bio-based, non-toxic, okay? And it is a one product that clean, lubricates, and protects. So we call it a CLP Plus because it actually works.
All right, time for everybody's favorite segment, Stump My Nephew. We found out a few years ago now that my nephew happens to be really good with gun trivia. And so if you send us a gun trivia message and we use it on the radio, we'll give you a free hat or shirt, whichever you prefer. And if you stump my nephew, then we'll give you a nice, really cool special prize. But that's not so easy. Guy hardly ever gets stumped. And remember, when we read him the question here on live, that's the first time he's seen the question. He doesn't get to research it. This is off the top of his head. So how you doing, Sam?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Very, very good. Okay, this is a good question because we talked about the new Glock V in an earlier segment, and that's of course all the gossip right now is Glock and how does it affect California and California law and AB 1127, all that good stuff. So Juan from Chula Vista, he writes in with a Glock question. Okay, Glock is known for not having a safety, but that is not exactly true. Glock's innovative design does not have a traditional button or lever safety. What are the three components of Glock's safe action system?
All right, Juan from Chula Vista. Thanks very much for writing in. Yeah, that's one of the really notable features of Glock pistols. They're far from the only handguns to do it. In fact, people have been carrying double action revolvers for more than a century now with no external safety, and they don't seem to freak out about that. But people always, well, not always, but some first-time shooters sort of side-eye some pistols like Glocks, and some M&Ps don't come with manual safeties. It's an option on those. And some other makes and models about, oh, it doesn't have a safety. That means it's dangerous. Well, no, they have internal safeties. The first one of those is the one that's externally visible, and that is that trigger blade. There's a it's a hinged blade that's in the trigger shoe, and that prevents the trigger from traveling to the rear unless that trigger blade is pressed. So the idea is that helps with drop safety, because if you drop the gun, then the spring-loaded blade won't be depressed. And it helps, I suppose, with if something gets snagged on the trigger but doesn't press in the blade, the trigger won't travel to the rear. You see that on many other makes and models of pistols too. Canics have them. Newer M&Ps have a blade style. Older M&Ps, I mean older than a couple years ago, have a hinged trigger shoe, but functionally works the exact same way.
There you go. So the first of the three is the trigger safety, which is that, I've never heard it called a blade before. That's interesting. I'm going to start using that. The blade in the middle of the trigger has to be pressed directly in order for the trigger to actually go. That's number one of the of Glock's 3-part safe action component.
Yeah, that's your trigger safety is number one. Now, I might only be able to go 2 for 3 on this. Okay. I might mess this up, but I know one of the other safety mechanisms. I don't know the correct order of them after the trigger safety, but one of the other safety mechanisms, and this is also common to many other pistol designs, is the plunger inside the slide. So if you pull your Glock apart, those of you who have Glocks or several other designs of modern striker-fired semi-automatic pistol, there is this plunger inside the slide. And when the trigger bar travels to the rear, there's this kind of tooth-shaped protrusion. It's really difficult to explain this without a demonstration example, but I can't show a gun on camera. There's this tooth on the trigger bar that pushes up on that plunger, and the plunger has a notch cut in it, so that when the plunger is in its normal resting position, downward position, which is pushed into by a spring, that prevents the striker from traveling forward. It's only when the trigger bar travels to the rear and pushes up on that plunger that the striker can then travel forward. So that's another internal safety on the gun.
There you go. The firing pin striker safety, a spring-loaded plunger inside the slide that physically blocks the striker firing pin from moving forward until the plunger is lifted. This is the one that physically blocks the firing pin. Yeah. Okay. So
that's a really cool mechanism, in my opinion, because even if it's not just blocking the trigger. Just blocking the trigger is great as a safety, but even if all else fails, even if the trigger mechanism breaks somehow, and the sear breaks and releases the striker, which I'll get to that in a minute. The striker physically cannot travel forward unless the trigger bar is pulled to the rear. And I struggle to think of a way the trigger bar could be moved to the rear without some external force being applied directly to it, but it's not externally accessible. So really the only way to pull the trigger bar to the rear that I can think of is to pull the trigger. Right. I don't know if this is the third form of safety that he's looking for, but this is a safety feature. What was it, Juan from Chula Vista? I don't know if this is the part of Juan's answer that he provided, but in Glock pistols, the striker is not fully pre-cocked. It's partially pre-cocked. So if you have a Glock, or if you shot one and you've noticed that the first part of the trigger pull is kind of mushy and spongy, the reason for that is partially that it's disengaging internal safeties, but part of that is because it's cocking the striker the rest of the way. The striker at its natural resting position when the gun is quote unquote cocked, it's not far enough to the rear that if it were to release at that point, it would be able to set off a round usually. You have to again, as you're pulling the trigger, you're cocking the striker the rest of the way. So it's not perfect. It's not a pure single action mechanism. It's like a single and a half action, and that contributes to good safety. And it also helps contribute to reliability, because there's you, the shooter, are putting energy into that striker spring to cock it the rest of the way to the rear. So that means that it's taking less energy out of the system when the pistol is cycling to cock the striker. It's not a big difference, but some engineers say it's a reliability improvement, and I'm not inclined to disagree with people who know what they're talking about.
So this is how he describes it, and I believe this is actually right off the Glock website. They describe it as a passive mechanical arrangement that prevents the trigger bar from releasing the striker unless the trigger is intentionally pulled.
Yeah, the terminology there is a little bit nebulous, but I think that may be what he's referring to.
I think it is, which is kind of funny considering what they're suing for. Is actually basically one of the safety features, or at least connected to one of the safety features. I don't know. Maybe I'm grasping a little too much at straws there, but that's essentially what they're describing. So there you go. Well, those are the three. You're absolutely right. So it does have a safety. It's just that people got so used to, pushing a button or flipping a lever that they don't consider Glock's three safeties as safeties. And then once that narrative took hold, back in the 80s, it was hard to get rid of. People still don't think of Glock as having a safety when they really do.
Well, that certainly wasn't helped by instances of, as people call it, Glock leg in New York when Glock pistols were starting to be adopted by law enforcement agencies to replace their old double action revolvers. And there was initially some, I don't know whether this was late 80s or early 90s, but there was a little bit of hullabaloo about, are these pistols unsafe? This newfangled plastic gun, is it unsafe? Well, no, it turns out that officers who maybe were poorly trained or had bad habits and didn't practice properly were in the habit pattern, just by muscle memory, of putting their fingers on the triggers and beginning to pull the trigger of the service weapon as they were on the draw stroke. Because if you're carrying a double action revolver, Smith & Wesson Model 10, Model 15, whatever, with the hammer down, then you have about a 12-pound trigger pull, maybe 12 to 15 pounds, figure about a 12-pound double action trigger pull. So yeah, it'll take a little bit of a fraction of a second, a little bit more of a fraction of a second, I should say, to squeeze that trigger all the way to the rear. But a Glock pistol out of the factory has about a 5.5-pound trigger.
Yeah,
so
big difference.
You're in the habit of beginning to squeeze the trigger when you're still drawing the gun, and you're used to a 12-pound pull, and you move to a 5.5-pound pull, you're going to shoot yourself in the leg. And that's exactly what happened. And instead of remedying that by training police officers better and telling them to stop being stupid, that brought about the New York trigger, which is a trigger that is bad on purpose because people were being stupid. Go figure.
But I think it's flipped now. I think the average gun owner, the average shooter, is surprised by the 12-pound trigger rather than the 5.5. I think the 5.5 or around there has gotten to be standard. Whereas if you hand them a revolver, I think they'd be shocked. Like, wow, takes a lot to really pull this thing back.
Well, the takeaway there, in my opinion, is that whatever gun you have to train with that gun. You can't say, oh, well, I've shot guns before, and then pick up something completely new and start carrying it without ever having shot the thing, or only having put a few rounds or a few magazines through it and not really being proficient with that specific firearm. I enjoy revolvers and I enjoy auto loaders, but I have found that when I'm shooting both side by side at the range, and I switch from my Rhino or whatever to like my 43X, I'm pulling way to one side because I'm holding the gun a little bit wrong. My fingers on the trigger a little bit wrong. There's some mental switching I have to do to go back and forth between the two guns. They're very different.
I agree. In fact, I hear a lot of people, I think a lot of the things, people pick up a gun and say, I don't really like the way this feels. I think there's so many, I don't know about most, but many, 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 many issues that people have with firearms is you have to train through them. If it doesn't feel good in your hand immediately, it probably will after 1,000 rounds. If you're not quite sure of the grip or whatever, the grip angle or whatever, you probably will get it down after 1,000 rounds. But I don't know. That's one of my controversial opinions. People get all fired up with me about that. Oh no. We're all special, and it has to feel right immediately, otherwise it's not the right gun for you or whatever. All right, fine. I think that if you spend the right amount of time with a firearm, there are very few out there that you can't get really comfortable with. But that's my hot take for the week. So
well, there you go.
There you go. All right, Sam. Good job. You got it. You nailed it. Thank you, Juan from Chula Vista. If anybody has a question for Sam, email us and we'll ask it on the air, and maybe you can stump my nephew and win something cool. So thanks a lot, Sam.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, man. Take care. So something interesting happened, Dakota.
Yeah.
I was looking at actually somebody sent it. Our mutual friend Dave Reed sent me an article. Study reveals 91% of gun owners have never fired in self-defense. Here's the bigger picture. And this is on MSN. This is fairly mainstream. And I thought to myself when I first saw it, I thought, yeah, we talked about that. And then if you looked at the article, they actually talked about Gun Owners Radio on the article.
Yeah,
which is very cool. A new peer-reviewed study is stirring up an old argument with fresh numbers. Most people who have access to firearms have never used one defensively, but that headline doesn't tell the whole story, and the what it means depends a lot on who you ask. So they're setting it up to basically say, hey, there's two interpretations of the number, and the one side is the study's author, Michael Estes. He's a PhD, and then Kimberly Burke, a PhD, and then Sultan Alteknidi, another PhD. We're just say 3 PhDs.
3 doctors walk into a bar.
Yeah, exactly. They say the data should reset how we talk about risk and policy.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, Michael Schwartz and Alicia Curtin from Gun Owners Radio stress that defensive gun use often ends without a shot fired. That's a nuance that they say gets lost in media narratives. Let's unpack both perspectives. So they go into what the study actually found. And then, for example, they surveyed 3,000 U.S. adults with firearm access through a probability-based national panel, which is the study we talked about not long ago.
Yeah.
Their central finding is simple and stark. 91.7% reported no lifetime history of defensive gun use. Less than 1% reported any defensive gun use in the past. So they're trying to paint the picture that well, what they did is they said, hey, it's super rare, which it is super rare. A defensive gun use is rare compared to the entire existence of humanity on the planet.
Right.
I mean, it's rare. When people did report using a gun defensively, the most common behavior wasn't firing. It was showing a firearm to be a perceived threat, which was about 4.7% of the time, followed by telling perceived threat that they had a firearm, which was 3.8% of the time. And then firing a threat, which was only 1% of the time, which was extremely rare. That's true. We went on to say that, what really the story here is not that defensive gun uses are so rare that we should just get rid of guns, or we should totally discount, that guns save lives. What the real news here is that a gun, just the mere presence of a gun, you don't actually have to fire a gun for it to defend you.
Right.
Which was, I think an important point. But the interesting thing about this article, if you read it, and this is the second time it's happened with Gun Owners Radio. First off, I'm very, very happy that our show is out there in the mix.
Yes.
So this study, without us talking about the study and pointing out the fact that, hey, a lot of defensive gun uses don't involve pulling a trigger, this study would just stand alone. People, come to different conclusions than the reality, and the voice of gun owners wouldn't be out there. So I'm really happy about that. But the other thing is, I'm pretty convinced that this was an article written by AI. If you read through the article, I think that MSN, I think that they basically plug in like, hey, pull up some controversial subjects like on guns, and write an article. If you read through this, it borrows heavily from the show, and it is a lot of quotes. It's a lot of quotes, and it's it's the study, and then it's almost like they said, hey, go find somebody talking about guns. Yeah. And then, take apart something that they're talking about and, go into depth on, whatever the other side is. That's funny. And then this is all AI. I mean, it could be they're giving credit to an author. They're saying that John Peterson wrote it, but maybe John Peterson used AI to write it. I think John Peterson used, if he even exists, I'm not even sure. That John Peterson, I couldn't even determine if that guy's even a real human being. That's hilarious. I'm starting to think that a lot of these news agencies are quadrupling their production by just using AI. I mean, to write all these. If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, right? Something I thought was interesting in that article and something that they didn't really get into very much is that part of the point was they were saying it's less likely for you to have a defensive gun use than it is for you to be exposed to gun violence. But when you look at what they were defining as gun violence or exposure to gun violence, they're including things like hearing gunshots in your neighborhood, knowing someone who was shot, or losing a person to firearm suicide. I would argue that some of those things aren't really gun violence exposure. If I hear shots in my neighborhood, which happened often, like I've heard shots in childhood, I've heard shots as an adult, I don't know just by hearing the shots if that was actually gun violence. It could have been a defensive use of a firearm. It could have been justified self-defense. So if you correct for justified self-defense or things like police-involved shootings, which everyone, probably can agree, not good, but also not as, not gun violence exposure specifically, right? Like if we're talking about a law enforcement officer defending their life or defending a person's life and in so doing has to take some shots, like I wouldn't categorize that as gun violence. But this was anyone who's ever heard a gunshot in their life got classified as someone who had gun violence exposure. Yeah. Well, that's not really a good study, I don't think. I don't think that's really demonstrating gun violence exposure if we're actually saying like who's been held up at gunpoint, who has been shot at, who knows somebody who was shot at unjustifiably, not, oh, my cousin was committing a home robbery and got shot in the process. Like, it was just kind of interesting to me how they did the study. I was like, well, yeah, of course you're going to see a lot more exposure because you're saying everybody who lives within 4 city blocks of a shooting possibly heard the shot versus those same 4 city blocks. How many of those homes even own a gun to be able to do a defensive gun use if needed? Probably way, way less, right? So I was like, this is really interesting that they're calling this a study. That's kind of one of the tricks is to make it so broad. Like everybody has been affected by gun violence. Right. Yeah. So many more people have experienced gun violence than had to use a gun defensively. Well, yeah. Also, so many more people have ears than have guns. So, that makes sense. So, one interesting takeaway, I think, is their takeaways. And at the end of the article, I just want to talk about these takeaways and then talk about why I think it's interesting. So at the end of the article, so they basically presented both sides. They said, here's what the study said, and then here's what Gun Owners Radio said. Yep. And then they said, what are the important takeaways? And they had 4. Number 1, most gun owners will never fire in self-defense. But then they went on to explain that doesn't make preparation pointless. It makes preparation focused. If a typical DGU, defensive gun use, is a verbal warning or defensive display, then de-escalation skills, legal literacy, and safe carry habits are every bit as vital as marksmanship. I thought that was a really interesting explanation. That was a good takeaway and an interesting explanation. Now, number 2, safe storage and carry practices matter. Number 3, lawful defensive display is not universal. And then number 4, public health and self-defense aren't mutually exclusive. Those were the 4 takeaways. I'm not going to go into the explanation on all 4. I wanted to just read that first as an example and then give the 4. But here's what I'm thinking. I mean, by the way, again, that smacks of AI.
Yes.
That just looks like someone said, hey, show me the 4 takeaways and why it's important. And boom, they come up with this as far as AI. I think we're going to get a more fair shake if this AI trend continues. Because I think that AI is far less passionate, about one side or the other. Whereas I'm willing to give some reporters the benefit of the doubt in that they're trying not to let their bias seep into their reporting.
Right. But it does. Yeah.
And then there are, of course, reporters where their bias is their reporting is their bias. I mean, they're absolutely
one and the same.
And they don't care. They're all about bias. They're trying to accomplish a goal. But even the ones that are really, truly trying hard, there's still a subtle, mission creep where they turn into an advocate rather than a reporter, where I don't think AI's got that problem.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think the AI tools like ChatGPT and Grok and things like that, I think those ones are a little bit, at least in my perspective from what I've used them for, I think they are a little bit more even-handed. I do think like the Google AI summaries are very left-leaning, because I've asked direct questions like about, gun show loophole or something like that, and they're just, putting all sorts of links to studies that are like articles that are opinion pieces, right? So I'm like, I don't know how that goes, but I think some of the platforms like Google and stuff are using their AI summary to just take like the top results for that search, and often those top results are going to be those more left-leaning sources. But when you're using something like ChatGPT, which isn't, or especially if you ask it to not pull from like Google results or whatever, you see a lot more of like an even-handed kind of logical back and forth of like, here's some pros and here's some cons, and here's some things this side got right and things that side got right. And I think it's a really interesting kind of thought exercise to feed it information and then have it tell you what it thinks,
Well, and I've seen studies 70-80% or whatever of reporters vote a certain way,
right?
And it's not the way we want them to vote, as far as, or at least it's not.
At least Second Amendment wise,
it's not Second Amendment. It's probably not pro Second Amendment, and with that kind of heavy bias, I'm wondering if this kind of artificial intelligence would, might end up benefiting the narrative in that, it makes it a lot more fair. Yeah. But have you ever snapped back at AI?
Like corrected it?
I've actually, I'll be looking for statistics or something like that on Second Amendment or shootings or whatever, and they'll give me a paragraph or two, and I'll just get mad and say, look, keep your anti-Second Amendment crap to yourself, AI, and then they'll actually apologize. Sorry, we'll be more, whatever.
That is hilarious.
I've actually done that.
No,
It helps me. It helps me keep zen.
That's
if I can just yell at AI, nobody's feelings are hurt.
I have used it to like summarize articles or things like that if I don't have time to read a whole thing, or I use ChatGPT a fair amount for helping clean up language, especially in like long emails, because I have to send a lot of long emails in my life. And so I'll put my email in and I'll say like, make this a little more concise, and they'll like cut out the extra words that you don't need and stuff. So I use it for things like that, but maybe I'll start playing around with the political stuff a little more.
Well, we're going to post a link to this. And again, this is MSN.com, not exactly known for their pro-Second Amendment.
No, not at all.
Bent. So check it out. Let us know if you think this was AI generated and what you think about AI and giving us, Second Amendment folks, a little bit more of a fair shake, and maybe cutting out some of the unintentional bias as well as some of the very intended bias by some reporters.